Good morning. This is the June 26, 25 commission meeting for Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission. And we have begun, so could we take a roll, please?
Commissioner Bajpai,
Present.
Commissioner Chowry,
Here.
Commissioner Glenn. Here. Commissioner Haig. Present. Commissioner Hoffman. Excused. Hoffman is excused.
He's excused.
Okay. Commissioner Moniz,
Present.
Commissioner Minty. Present. Commissioner Warren.
She's excused.
Chair Dory.
Here. And I would entertain a motion for approval of the May 15, 2025 commission meeting minutes.
Chair, I would move to approve the May 15, 2025 commission meeting minutes as written.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Take the roll, please.
Commissioner Bajpai,
Yes.
Commissioner Chowry.
Yes.
Commissioner Glenn. Yes. Commissioner Haig. Yes. Commissioner Moniz,
Yes.
Commissioner Minty. Yes. Chair Dory.
Yes. I'd also entertain a motion for the approval of the June 5th, 2025 special commission meeting minutes.
Move to approve the special commission meeting minutes as written.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Please take the roll.
Commissioner Bajpai,
Yes.
Commissioner Chowry,
Yes.
Commissioner Glenn. Yes. Commissioner Haig. Yes. Commissioner Moniz,
Yes.
Commissioner Minty. Yeah. Chair Dory.
Yes. So I think we're going to skip over, since Kurt's not here, we'll move on to the prohibitions and interesting.
Oh, we're gonna move on to that right now. Wonderful, I'm happy. Good morning, Commissioner.
reverie.
Good morning, commissioners, and good morning, audience. I've been asked to provide you with a little primer on the rules against taking positions, promoting or opposing certain political matters. And usually most of these rules apply to your staff. But there are some rules that apply to you. So the general prohibition against political advocacy is found in ORS 260. I don't have it all, 432. And the first question that comes to mind, and most people ask when we talk about the rules against advocating for or against a political measure while you're a public official, is, hey, what about my free speech rights? And a lot of you and a lot of elected officials are political animals, right? And so it feels uncomfortable to talk about this. The first thing I want to say is these rules apply to your staff more stringently than they apply to you as appointed officials. And they only apply to both you and your staff when you're acting in your official capacity as a commissioner or as a public employee. So they do not restrict the actions you do, your promotion or opposition of a political measure in your private. We'll talk more about how you draw some lines between your private life and your public life as commissioners, as I'm sure you're finding out is difficult to do sometimes, right? So that's the first thing I want to get out of the way. And then I intend to talk to you about the basic rules, how they apply to you. We will go into how they apply to some of your employees, the commission's employees. And then take some time to answer any questions that you might have, if that's all right with the commission.
Sure.
All right. So first of all, what is prohibited? You are prohibited from promoting or opposing a political committee, an appointment, nomination, or election of a public officer. So if you are supporting somebody who's running for office or opposing somebody who's running for office, the filing of any initiative, referendum, or recall petition. So all those petitions that are at the local government level and sometimes at state levels. The gathering of signatures on an initiative, referendum, or recall petition, or the adoption of a measure for recall. So all that political stuff, meaning political committees, people running for office, or measures or initiatives that are going to be on the ballot. And when are you prohibited from doing such political advocacy? When you're working as a commissioner. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But so I don't want you to be too confused about the stuff you're doing in your private life. We'll talk. There is also another restriction on this, meaning when does this come into effect? Right? Because politics is cyclical and measures get on the ballot, but they also are being reviewed for the ballot and they're waiting for a vote. So when do these restrictions kick in? For initiatives, referenda, and recall, those petitions, the prohibition kicks in when the prospective petition is filed with an elections office. So you could hear rumors about a petition or a measure being circulated, and it's going to be on the ballot, right? But you're not subject to any prohibitions on advocating for or against that petition until it is filed with the elections officers. That's the key when you're like, okay, I'm going to refrain from commenting or using my position while I'm working, right? For a ballot measure, it's effective when the measure is referred to the ballot by a governing body. So it's placed and referred to the ballot. Sometimes they certify them in other ways, but really when it's referred or certified to the ballot. For appointment, nomination, or election of a public officer, it begins when the person is seeking office. That's pretty mushy legal language, right? But that's what they provide us when they're seeking office. So if somebody's announced or obviously is running, that's when you're like, okay, maybe I don't use my position to promote person, support this person. And for political committees, it's when the political committee is active. So when it's filed and becomes active. You are not restricted in any way from providing information, right? Just basic information like, yes, this will be on the ballot on this date, right? But we'll talk more about what that is and how tricky that can be later. So the one issue I want to get to before we discuss those other issues is who has to comply with this, right? So all public employees, and they comply in a different standard and different way than you would. Members of boards or commissions, they have to comply with 264.32. And this applies when you are acting in your official capacity as a commissioner. So what does that look like? And when are you acting in your official capacity? Well, clearly here, right? But you also do work when you're away from the dais, right? When you're away from here. And you'll have to figure out when you're acting in your official capacity or not to determine when you can be a political advocate or opponent. Some of the ways you act in your official capacity are when you attend meetings, right? Like here, speaking on behalf of the board or commission. So the commission has authorized you to be a representative and you're speaking perhaps to the press or to the legislature, or maybe to some advocates or industry. That's your official capacity. Working on a duty assigned by the commission. So that's official capacity. Working on official publications. If somebody, if you're, for example, if you've been assigned to work with a committee who's putting together a publication, or appearing at events in your official capacity. So those are the kinds of things, and I think those are pretty easy to suss out. If you're ever in doubt, please do ask your staff and get confirmation. This is what you want from me. I'm working as a commissioner here. And so then you know. If you're ever in public and you find yourself, say, for example, being called up to talk about OLCC generally, or to make a report about OLCC, I think you should assume that if you decide to stand up and represent the commission, even though it's unexpected, you're probably going to be assumed to be working in your official capacity. if indeed you are called up in your private life, say you're attending a political event and you are promoting somebody who you think would be a good state rep. And you're speaking in public about that, and it looks as if somebody's confusing your role, like, or you're a commissioner and you're doing this. I think just making a statement on the record. I'm here in my private capacity. I do sit on the OLCC board. I'm not authorized by the OLCC board to make any statements on this. I'm only speaking my personal capacity. And if ever you are asked to promote or oppose a political position privately, let's say you're in the legislature visiting for some, whatever reason, and you're there on OLCC business, but somebody pulls you aside because you happen to be a precinct committee person or something, I would document that. I would document it and say, hey, listen, I was at the, for your files, I was going to be testifying 2 hours from then at court committee, but somebody pulled me aside. I was speaking in my private capacity. I told them that, just document it. You don't have to, but I think it's wise. Okay. So that is not the way, because it's easy to avoid that problem. That is not the way that boards and board members tend to get in trouble with this rules against political advocacy. What sometimes happens is there is a measure that affects the OLCC that's going to be placed on a ballot. And staff is concerned about the measure. They've been talking about it before it gets placed on the ballot. It's now placed or referred to the ballot. And staff is still talking about the issue, like, what are we going to do if this passes, if this fails, how are we going to do this? And somehow commissioners get drawn into that conversation. And somehow commissioners direct staff, well, you should do X, Y, Z, or, hey, can you create a summary for us so the board understands the issues on this? You cannot direct staff to promote or oppose any such matter, candidate, path, measure, anything. So part of the prohibitions are not only you can't do it, but you can't direct a public official or a public employee to do the prohibited thing also. And I've seen a lot of elected officials and appointed officials get stuck there because they're like, well, we just wanted a referendum because we as elected officials were allowed to take political positions. We wanted to maybe get some kind of public document stating what we as a board think about a certain matter. And I'm talking about elected officials here, not appointed, who is appointed. And so they ask staff to provide information or provide a pros and cons list or something. That's where people get in trouble. So to revisit that, you may not promote or oppose a political matter while you're serving in your official capacity. And you may not direct public employees to do so. And so that's a pretty easy thing to remember. And then the protectionary rules are, if you find yourself in a place where you're being asked to do that, really clarify when you're acting in your official capacity and when you're not. And then if you couldn't clarify that publicly, keep private notes and let Laura know and just provide the note to Laura. And so then you'll be in the clear. The other issue that commissioners sometimes get drawn into is use of title. Sometimes people will use a title when they're, for example, they want to file a position in support of a political candidate in the voters pamphlet. And so they'll use their title, OLCC commissioner, city councilor, and member of the school boards. You may use your title when you engage in political advocacy as long, and you're engaging in political advocacy, as long as you're not engaging in an official OLCC capacity. Again, we're always talking about, are you engaging in prohibited political advocacy or opposition when you're in your official capacity? So if you've clarified, and if I were drafting a statement in support of a candidate in the voters pamphlet, I would clarify, I am not speaking as a commissioner, but you could use your title when you sign, right? So that's what I would do if I, or perhaps just not even use the title. There are other ways that public employees and elected officials have to act in regards to these rules. And I'm happy to provide those for the commission later to train their staff. And I'm happy to discuss them with your staff, but I don't think those are really helpful to you now. So I'm going to skip past those. But I will mention them in relation to some interactions you may have. So for example, staff may be asked to distribute political material or use public property, public logos, or interact with the media, or engage in forums or debates on issues. And they are prohibited during their work time from doing so. And you are prohibited from directing them to do so. So if those issues come up, you can't direct staff to do any of that stuff. The reason I mention those specifics is that sometimes it's difficult to know, oh, is this political advocacy? So when you think about political material, using public property for campaigns, a typical way that comes up is like somebody wants to take campaign pictures in front of fire engines because they're a big supporter of, of the fire district or something. So that could be. They're asked to interact with the media on a particular issue by the commission, or your staff is asked, that's when it comes up, or forums and debates. So those are some of the, I just want you to keep that in mind. So little red flags can go up with those issues. That's the simplified version. It's not difficult. It is tough to spot the issues when you get there. So that's why I'm giving you those little red flags. And it's easy to stay out of that fray unless you're really involved in politics elsewhere. And then the two can intermingle. And so you'll need to be clear to publicly separate your role from what you're doing in your personal life. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Not a question, but I appreciate you say it's simple, yet people get in trouble if not.
They do.
So,
They do. And I think what I'm trying to say is it's simple to stay out of trouble if you can remember those red flags. And often I find it's not appointed board members and commissioners that get in trouble. It's usually elected officials or public employees because they are so much more engaged in political matters. And then when the triggers hit, like something's referred to a ballot or somebody's filed for office, they have to change their behavior, and that's hard to do because we're human.
Christie, thank you. I also find out my title doesn't carry any weight at home either.
Yeah.
Doesn't carry. Thank you, Christie. Appreciate your help. And Ms. Rosie, oh, there you go. Hi.
Hi.
Rosie Chang has given us a little update on the legislative session. A nice, easy session, right?
It was fun. It was fun. It was fun in a lot of ways. For the record, Wendy Shaflin, Government Relations Director, Tribal Liaison, for the OLCC. Happy to see Coco, here this morning. So what I'll do is you have some information in front of you on all the bills, and I won't touch on them specifically, but just to borrow from, what Christie shared. it was a challenge for us as well as the legislative staff, and we can't really go in there and advocate for any specific bill or against any specific bill. Our role is to provide information to the legislators on a particular bill to say, here are the facts, here's how the rules pertaining to OLCC. So I'll discuss that a little bit, but just keep in mind the measures that are in front of you. Those are the ones that are enrolled right now. We started January 21st. Session, it's supposed to sign die on the 29th, that's Sunday. I heard from a little birdie yesterday that potentially it might end tomorrow. But for the most part, they are continuing to work, and the biggest challenge is the transportation budget that they're all considering this morning. And for the remainder of the day into tomorrow. So, yes, this year was particularly challenging, and it was challenging for a number of reasons. What's going on at the federal level and what's going on at the state in terms of our funding. There was a lot of challenges there. For us, it was uniquely challenging as well. And you can get to the next page, Laura. It was uniquely challenging because we saw a vast amount of legislation this session that was strangely unique, but a lot of them are placeholder measures. And so oftentimes legislators will have a placeholder. We've been discussing this from the beginning of session, just to transition in towards the end of session. So those placeholder bills, and thanks to the Senate office and the clerk's office at the Capitol, they provided this information that it's not concluded yet because tomorrow is the end of session, and oftentimes there are additional measures being introduced just to close out the session. So these are the bills to date from last week, the amount of bills were available. And so in total, we had about 3,400 bills, a little over 3,400 bills, and 1,267 from the Senate. We had about 2,100 from the House. Of those, there was about 900 placeholder bills. And this was a sharp increase. I believe it was Legislative Council that added. It was a sharp increase from about a decade ago. It was only 100 placeholder bills compared to 900 this session. So as much as this was sort of a really fast moving session, it was challenging on the one hand, but it created a lot of opportunities for OLCC. I think the unique opportunity that provided for us and for the previous director and the new director is that it allowed us to build some new relationships. There are a lot of legislators who were new to the process. They were introduced into the process as we were going on. It sort of added to the long session because we had to explain things in a sense of urgency about OLCC, our control model, ensuring that we are not advocating in any way about the control model. That's what we are. We are a control model state. Explaining that to members, but it helped us to build some new relationships with the new member, sustain those ongoing ones that we've had. And we also were able to lay some kind of stronger foundation for the future on policy that we're going into the 2026 legislative session. So for this overview, we have a number of bills. It was the certainty of the session, but it was also very positive, right? If you look at our budget, the OLCC budget, for example, we saw an increase. The governor came in, she gave us our 2-year recommended budget compared to previous cycle. She really worked across the statewide enterprise. Every single agency was involved. It took a little bit longer, but she worked with everyone to make sure that the budget was crafted to meet the needs of all our agencies. So on March 19th, the co-chair came in. They have their own budget process. That budget process doesn't take into consideration the May economic forecast. So they had to recalibrate after the May forecast came out and the budget numbers came out, and they said, okay, we have to pull it back a little bit because now we have to look at the amount of funding that we have and what we can put out to those core services that's needed around the state. So I think the most important thing for the OLCC that despite some sharp questions that we had during our presentation to the Transportation and Economic Development Committee, the budget was approved and the budget was approved at a meaningful increase. There's some numbers in front of you from previous cycle. And I think this is important for us to show that the legislature supports OLCC, the model, the public safety, and what we contribute, the OLCC as an agency contribute to the general fund. And so it also sort of lays a good stability for the federal funding unknowns. So we can offset any shortfall that we can see in any future budgets. So there's a good support for OLCC. I'll get into a little bit on the policy front, but I won't go over any specific policy. And you have those in front of you. The cannabis regulation, for example, and going back to what Christy was sharing, of being in front of the legislature and discussing some of these policy, the caveat is that, you know, legislative staff, we can't directly go in and advocate against or take a position against the bill without talking to the governor's office. But also our role is to lay out the facts on why something might have a potential impact on an agency. And so we saw a lot of activities as well from legislators introducing a lot of cannabis bills. A lot of them were challenging. And this is where I said the opportunity was there for us in meeting with members and being able to share with them where the OLCC plays a role. And so we were able to build those old relationships and sustain the new ones. Let me rephrase. Sustain the old relationship and build new ones with legislators who were just coming in. And so the cannabis regulation aspect of things, the hemp discussion around that as well. There's still a lot of discussion around hemp regulation. We continue to have with members. For the alcohol regulation, we're continuing to have discussion with legislators. The bills that we saw this year was really about the compensation process. We did see a bill that included an expansion of licensees having the authority to sell low-proof distilled alcohol. I think legislators immediately turned that one down. We didn't have to go in or provide any information on that. And we also saw some updates to wine and beer tax increase potentially. That did not make it through the legislative process, but that came from House Bill 3610. Mainly because OLCC oversaw the task force on health, public health and safety with Representative Sanchez. We followed and staff followed. I know Arno followed a lot of these bills as well on public health and safety with OLCC. We tracked a number of these bills because of what it represented for OLCC. The Oregon bottle bill, I think you guys had a discussion on that with OVRC. I did write into a member yesterday about the bottle bill, and she mentioned that OVRC will continue to have discussion on the implementation of that bill. And I gave her a caveat that she might be able to sit in on some of our meetings on the implementation of the bill because of an enterprise-wide bill that will affect all agencies. So if, for example, we have a bill, let's use Senate Bill 992, the bottle bill, for example. It was sponsored by Senator Solomon. That bill, because she was the chief sponsor of that bill, if we are forming a committee, an advisory committee, rulemaking committee around that bill, there's a bill now in effect that says we would have to invite the member to sit into that advisory committee on the bill to discuss, to ensure that the legislative intent is being followed through with the administrative rule as well. So that it will give us a greater role with legislators as well, how often they will be able to make it, that's a discussion for the future as well. But to harken back to Christie again, there's a lot of bills that include collective bargaining, and these are the enterprise-wide bill that will affect all of you. It's a rule advisory committee, it's the public meeting laws, there's conflict of interest laws as well that will impact all of us. So I think taken together, these bills and measures kind of reinforces the state's commitment to ensuring that we're being transparent and that we're being held accountable in our public service. Overall, I think that is a presentation for today because we're still in session technically, so we haven't concluded. So there are a number of bills out there that will be added to what you have in front of you. For the July commission meeting, I'll be able to present a little bit more on the bills and the overall bills, but that's it for now. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Rosie. Excellent. Questions? You did too good a job. No question.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good to be here. Have a good one.
And then,
All right.
this Looking tribal, comments by community, bring here, bring us up today, please. You want to step forward, you want to?
Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
I'm Margaret Simpson. You've seen me, those that were here for the auxiliary agreement. I worked on that with my tribe. Chair Mead is not able to join today. It is our restoration celebration week. And we are welcoming citizens from all over back home to our homeland. So she's enjoying that time. So you get me today.
Well, give Chairman our best.
I will, yes, I will. I'd like to start with just a little bit of history. I would like to start with that. On June 28th, 1989, Congress restored the Coquille Tribes recognition. This congressional act reversed a 2-year policy of federal termination that left our people without a homeland and forced many of us to relocate to areas throughout Southern Oregon and beyond. Termination proves to be a terrible failure, even though it caused poverty, culture loss, social issues, health disparities, our tribe's culture, lifeways, cohesion, and identity survived. Decades after making this terrible mistake, Congress recognized its error and restored several tribes in Western Oregon. That was a big day. My tribe, the Coquilles, were the most recent Oregon tribe to be restored. Thanks to our grassroots efforts, and many of you might know, Senator Mark O. Hatfield fought hard and worked for our tribe. As a government, the Coquille Indian tribe has an obligation to provide a wide range of services to our citizens. Even though we don't make per capita payments, it is our, you all know what per capita payments are. Okay. It is through federal funding that most of our services are funded through. And there's always a shortfall every year. Basic healthcare, education, elder assistance, housing, and cultural restoration services for our members. And unlike other governments, we have no way to tax. So we can't tax and use that revenue to take care of our people. So for the welfare of our people and to protect our sovereignty, we pursue economic development. All net proceeds of our efforts in economic development fund the services that we provide to our tribal families and also the surrounding communities. To support this effort, we were honored last year to sign 2 groundbreaking agreements with the OLCC. One was to open the first tribally owned distillery, and the other was our restated EPCOM, which is our compact for the purchase of alcohol and beverage services at our newly rebranded Coquille Casino Resort Tuesday. I'm happy to let you guys know that construction is underway. We're 7 months into it, and we're slated to finish that by the end of the year. Today, we look forward to the approval of the EPCOM agreement with the OLCC for beverage services at our new Medford gaming location. This new EPCOM is virtually the same as the one we previously negotiated. The benefits of this agreement ultimately translates into improved services for our tribal families and sustainable family wages for our citizens and the residents of Medford. It's always a lot of work to bring these types of agreements together, so I'd like to thank several people for their work on getting us to this place where we are today. At the OLCC, I would first like to thank outgoing director Craig Prince. I would also like to thank, and if I say the last name wrong, please forgive me, Shannon Hopkins, Melanie Musel, Rosie Shotkin, and Heidi Anderson, who was our lead investigator and worked closely with me. So I see I said some names wrong. At the Oregon Department of Justice, Jeanette Forth, thank you. And Karen Cleverly, she's very familiar to us, and both provided great oversight as we work through the agreement and work diligently to help us achieve a mutually beneficial outcome. And finally, I'd like to thank Governor Kotek and Shana Radford for supporting the process that we use to get this done. Agreements with tribes is always a bit more complicated, and we appreciate all the efforts. Commissioners, this completes my comments, but I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioners? Margaret, thank you very much. I'm very proud that we're able to work at this level, two sovereign nations working together now after all that you've been through for the years. I appreciate your efforts on this on behalf of this connection. The courage and strength and determination that you've had to help make this happen is admirable. And to see this two separate nations working together to each other's benefit is a rare gem in this culture today. And I like the example that we're setting. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate this relationship.
We do too. Thank you.
Chair, can I ask one quick question? You mentioned a name change.
Yeah.
And could you go into that just a little bit?
Yes. So the Mill Casino, which is our flagship gaming operation, had a 30-year anniversary. And at that time, we also launched the rebranding of the casino. So the Mill Casino is now Coquel Casino Resort Tuesday. We have a huge new digital sign. It's really beautiful.
When I go down there, I'll be confused. Thank
Thank you very much. We got some action on this as well. Entertain a motion.
Chair, I move that the commission approve the proposed intergovernmental agreement governing liquor licensing and regulation between the Coquille Indian Tribe and the state of Oregon, Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Commissioner Bashkow,
Yes.
Commissioner Shari,
Yes.
Commissioner Glenn,
Yes.
Commissioner Hayes,
Yes.
Commissioner Malia,
Yes.
Commissioner Minty.
Yes.
Chair Doherty.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very,
Thank you
very
all.
proud of this. Construction update. John. Okay. Lisa? You okay?
Hi. Yeah, thank you,
Very
Chair
good.
Doherty.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello, good morning. Laura, could you please give me permission to share my screen?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No worries. For the record, my name is Lisa Bertram. I'm the Distilled Spirits Program Director for the OLCC. And I have a construction update for the Middle Oak project down in Canby. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, construction is well underway down in Canby. So have some updates for y'all today. We'll go through. On-site activities currently, this is a picture of the site a few weeks ago. We are doing the slab right now. So all the under slab utilities have been laid and are complete. We have some on-site cameras that are at the site today. So folks, there's a link that we can view on a daily basis. There's like a live link and some other shots. There's multiple angles, multiple cameras set up. So we get to see kind of action on site. There's a panorama view as well. And there's also a small video that's been put up on LinkedIn of the progress out there. So lots going on. This picture to the left is them pouring the initial slab or the first slab that went down. There's a large slab design that I'll show a little bit later. And so it's being poured in a bunch of different sections. They do it pretty early in the morning to get it done. So each of those sections is well underway. As far as the tilt panels, this is a tilt panel building, which means essentially the sides of the building are laid on other slabs of concrete and then are tilted up at a certain point. So the final design for those are underway. They do have a mock-up on site, which is just a smaller version of the actual build so that we can see, the slab and then what the actual tilt panels will look like in the end. It's a much smaller version. Some pictures from the site as of right now. So they're, doing a lot of work out there as far as the, other pieces of the slab as far as like that's being done, but there's, other installations going in. On the left is storm piping and manhole. And then on the right, we have electrical. So there's a lot of electrical pieces that are going into different areas, conduit running to different parts of the site. Slab work. So like I said, there's a lot of slab work being done right now. The slab gets done first, and then after they're done with the slab, then they'll start on the tilt panels to put those up. So they pour big chunks of slab, and then they, put the they'll do it like a sealer on them. They cut some saw marks in them. So this is on the left-hand side. You can see they're doing the kind of the surface texture of it, and then there's other areas that they're working on. So the right-hand picture shows kind of how that works. So there's like the slab piece here, and then to the right is just where the rebar is. So they do formwork and rebar, and then certain areas of the slab are certain thicknesses dependent on what's going on top of them. So our material handling system is going in, and we'll have an upper deck equipment platform where some of the conveyance will be. And we'll also have a multi-tier pick line that'll have multiple levels. So all of those conveyors are going to go up essentially onto the equipment platform, and where that area is, it has to have just a little bit thicker slab to make sure it can hold the weight and has like seismic conditions built into it. So lots goes into making sure we have the right slab thickness in certain areas, and that all the rebar and stuff is in place prior to the pour. This is just a view of one of the cameras. Like I said, it has a really great view of the construction site. There's a live site, and then there's also different angles that we can view at irregular intervals. It's kind of nice just seeing, because I can't be out there right now. It's nice just being able to check in and see where things are going and things are happening on site. This is the northwest camera. And then we also have a southeast camera that looks at a different direction. You can see there's lots of activity on site with everything going on. And then this is also the southeast camera, but this is more the mobilization site. So you can see that the J.E. Dunn's construction trailers, those yellow domes in the back are the retention domes. So in Oregon, all the water retention, any water that basically occurs on site has to be retained. And we do that underground. So we don't have a pool out or a pond. It's all underground. And so this next couple of weeks, we're working on putting in those retention domes underground, making sure we have, big pits dug for those. And then those will go in for all water retention on site. I'm going to go into some project risks that we know of right now. The first one has to do with the slab. So the initial slab, the 20,000 square foot slab, had some surface issues that we're working through. Because of those surface issues, we then had to kind of go back to the mix and determine, why is it having surface issues? How can we mitigate those in the future? So created some test pours. The way the tilt panels work is that you have to actually pour, it's called a rat slab. That's a slab, essentially a test slab that will later be destroyed and taken away from the site. And so we use those rat slabs to test different concrete pours to make sure we had the right mix going forward. So we did that, we changed the mix. They then did a second slab. The slab pour 2 was a 10,000 square foot slab, so a little smaller. But basically we did that slab with the new mix to test if the concrete was good, and it was, thank goodness. So that slab, that mix is what we're using going forward. What this means is that we're still on schedule for the slab itself. So that schedule is not impacted. What is impacted is we need to fix that initial 20K pour. So we're still working through how we're going to do that now, and then when we can do that. So the slab itself works where it also has like an area outside of it where the tilt panels actually sit. They don't sit on these slabs that we're pouring now. So we have opportunities to either fix it while we're doing continued slab work now, or we can fix it in the future after the tilt panels are up. All that to say, we will stay on schedule for the slab pours and the tilt panels, but we do know we'll have to fix some of these issues on that first slab. The whole slab itself doesn't have the surface issues. It's like little areas within it. So either opportunity to just, take out the areas that are impacted. But again, staying on schedule, but we do need to fix some of those initial pour work. This is just a picture of the slab design itself. So this is the entire slab of the building. The green sections at the bottom here are what has been poured as of yesterday or as of this week. So you can see those are all poured. The yellow is rocked. So, all of this has to have a grading on it and then get aggregate put on it so that the slab can sit on top of that. The orange pieces are rebar. So after the rock, we put the rebar in the formation so that we can do the next pours. And then the red is not started. And so there's a couple sections of red that we're using. So this little section of red over here is actually used to get the crane with the concrete into this pour section. And so that'll be poured last. And then you can see we have other sections here that those are essentially the last to go. The green dots are all of the footings for the internal building columns. So because this is a 345,000 square foot building, it will have internal building columns that will be, throughout the build. Each one of these little squares is a 50 foot by 50 foot square. And so all the footings have been built at this point, and then the columns will go in at a later date. This is, again, the southeast camera, but this is where you can see kind of a better view of the pour. So the middle and this part in the middle is that slab pour. And then you can see there's a slab pour on the outside here. And that's, again, that rat slab or that test slab that we were using to get the mix right. So that eventually will come back out. But this way I thought was a good picture of, service on site of where that slab is as of this week. The other big known project risk right now has to do with permanent power. I did bring this up at the last commission meeting, and I want to go into more detail now so that we can all understand where we're at. The permanent power for this building has not been secured from the Canby utility. So Canby utility is a separate entity than the city of Canby. Essentially, every project needs a will serve letter from the utility that says, we will serve your power. At this time, we don't have that from Canby utility. We know we need permanent power on site by April of next year. We do have temporary power at the site. So all the constructions that's happening now has temporary power, and that's been secured. We just don't have the will serve letter that's been secured yet. So the complication here is there's multiple entities involved. So Bonneville Power Authority, which is the BPA, Portland General Electric is PGE, and then the Canby utility. So they're the administrator of the city of Canby's electrical system. So they're, power within the city limits, and our building does sit within the city limits of Canby utility. So the complication here is that Canby utility purchases power from the BPA. So this first one is the BPA is that's who's providing the power to Canby utility. In the middle of them is PGE. So PGE owns the transmission lines between BPA and Canby utility. And then Canby utility, like I said, purchases directly from BPA. So BPA says they can provide all needed for this build, but the PGE transmission lines that sit in between can only transmit a certain amount of power across their lines. So that's kind of the structure of the issue as it sets today. There's a lot on this slide, and I'm just going to kind of walk through it. So again, we can kind of understand where we're at. So the use really is the city of Canby provides the land use approval. So we've secured land use approval. We've been issued permits to build on the site. We paid all of our fees prior to the construction. We did start construction in March of 2025. During that time, there was a study done. So there was a power study that was requested by PGE. So again, they're the one that holds the transmission lines between the two entities. The study that was sent by PGE included the Canby project or the Meadowlark project, but it also included several other projects that the city of Canby wants to do. I think there was 5 total at the time. So the full load for the toll projects, including Meadowlark, but also others, was 7 megawatts. OLCC was listed on that PGE study at that time as needing 3.2 megawatts of power for this warehouse. The outcome of that study basically said that PGE does not have the ability at this point to transmit the full 7 megawatts of power for all the projects. Then the will serve letter was not issued by the utility because PGE said we can't actually do the full load for all the projects. And it said PGE, in order to do a full 7 megawatt load, would have to update their transmission lines. That would cost around $45 million and take 5 to 7 years to do that. And I want to be clear here that the Meadowlark project is the only project in that listing that is actually in construction. The other projects are either several years down the line or within the next 2 years. So our project is the only one that's actually being built at the time and has asked for the will serve letter. Because of that outcome, we went back to our electrical engineer and said, hey, let's really look at what the power we need is so that we can be clear with PGE and Canby Utility that what our power needs are. So our electrical engineer came back and said, okay, our actual power needs based on what we know today are actually 2.1 megawatts. So that really was like an estimate at the beginning, which got us to the 3.2 megawatts. And then based on everything that we know today, what we're actually building, what we're actually needing is actually 2.1 megawatts. The info that we originally put in also didn't include our generator. So we have a generator that we're building on site, which will run fire safety, security. If the power goes out, all of those things will continue to run. The generator also has the ability to run the material handling system. So if we lost power, there was a power outage, this building could still operate full capacity essentially for up to 3 days using this 2.1 megawatt generator or 2 megawatt generator. The original study also didn't have some other things in it. So we know we're putting in a solar array on the roof. That solar cannot be sold back to the city. So we're actually using it internally to the building. So not only do we have the generator, we also have solar panels. That was part of our green energy. We have to spend 1% on green energy, and that solar power array was part of that. So we have these other things to mitigate if we were to lose power. We actually are self-sustainable on site, and that total load that we would need regularly is 2.1 megawatts. So all that brought us to where we are today. So a new study was requested then by PGE with these other known factors. The correct amounts were put in. That was requested on May 4th for a new total of 5 megawatts. So it includes the Meadowlark project and then also a couple other projects. It's limited now as 2 of the projects are no longer included in that study. So OLCC and our owners rep coming group have attended several meetings. So we went to the Canby Utility Board meeting to ensure that we were on record of saying, listen, we need this letter. This is our power need. Our power need doesn't include these other projects. It's really just for us. We also went to the City of Canby commission meeting and talked to the mayor and the city council to say, hey, we have a concern here. We want to make sure we get this power. We need it by this time, and we want to make sure we're on record of saying that this is vital to our project to get this. Internal to OLCC, we've talked with Department of Administrative Services, who actually holds this contract. So because of the price point of the contract, it's administered by DAS. So they're really the owner of the contract. We've had meetings with them and the Department of Justice to ensure that our contract language protects us and that we understand going forward. As we put pressure on these different areas, how is that going to impact our project? At this time, the recommendation really is to get with the Canby Utility and say, hey, this is the load we need is smaller than this total load. Can you give us the power in certain ways? Any questions on this so far as we sit here?
What is Plan B? Is there some
great question.
What happens if we don't come through with, they don't come through with it?
Yeah. So there's a couple, I'm going to go to the next slide, which is the resolution. I think some of this may answer some of that question. So ultimately, we need the will serve letter no matter what. But there are some certain other avenues that we can take to get the power that doesn't include like this particular substation. So there's one substation right now that they're using for the study, but actually Canby Utility has several others. And so they've given us some other ways that they can mitigate this power issue. One is, we need the study to be done no matter what, but it includes more entities than just us. And so we're under the standing that our power load should be able to be on the transmission lines. The next study is going to be broken up into a couple different areas. So it's not just going to look at the total load. It's going to say how much power can those PGE transmission lines actually, transmit. So what they're going to do is evaluate the load for just OLCC and determine, if that power load on the lines is good, then we should be able to do that. There's also in the new study or the new details of the study is we can move some of the load to a different substation. So Canby Utility itself can either move some of their internal city load to that other substation, and we can use that substation, or they can kind of disperse the power around so that we're able to use a different substation, potentially using a different power transmission line. It's all through PGE though as well. As far as plan B for this, we don't have another plan B as far as there's no other place that we can get power from other than Canby Utility. So what we've done is really tried to understand who the players are. The mayor of Canby reached out to the representative, Rep. Drazen, who represents that district. So they're involved as well. And it's my understanding that the city wants this to happen. So they are pushing to have it happen. It's really, how do we get that serve letter? Entities involved are careful to say that, they can't guarantee us the power, but they don't think it's going to be a problem. And that's why it's a known risk at this point, is because until we have that letter, we don't know if that's true. The other thing that's happening now is actually Canby Utility and PGE, they're on site putting in transmission line conduits and things. So they're actually building the infrastructure now for the power when we get the will serve letter. And I think that's an encouraging activity. Is they're actually putting the infrastructure on site that they need. So when we get the letter, they can hook it up. This is why it's a known risk at this time. It's complicated.
Lisa, we said that we had a backup generator, a 2 megawatt backup generator. Is that correct?
Yes,
And
that's
how
correct.
long- Did you say that would only not handle for 3 days, or did I misunderstand?
Yeah. So the generator itself is a diesel generator, right? So it has a fuel tank attached to it. So on one tank of fuel, that thing will run at 2.1 or 2 megawatts for 3 days straight. If we wanted to run this building off the generator, we could. We would just have to keep refueling the tank. And so that's an option. It's not a cost-effective option, I would say. It's more for emergencies and a backup. And in that case, we would continue to run our current facility, right? If we needed to do that. But yes, we do have the capability. The intent was, if the power goes out, or, we have a storm and some of the lines go down and we lose power at the building, at the very minimum, we can do fire safety security. And then if we want to operate, we can. And that's why we have this large generator on site.
Yeah, I just thought 3 days was a little bit short if we had major event, so.
Yeah,
but
that's
we
just
could-
the tank. Yeah, that's the tank size. Yeah. Yeah, and it's diesel because it's not, usually you could connect it to other ways too, but you don't want to connect it to electrical if the electricity goes out. So but we do have the ability to refill if we need to.
Commissioners, other questions?
Any questions?
Lisa, thank you very much. Appreciate
Yeah,
it. Nice
so
to
this,
see you.
I always put a rendering at the end here. So this is a rendering of the front of the building. Just one more thing is we are currently working on not just, the concrete and things like that, but we're working through the actual building itself, what it's going to look like. We're also working through the art. So we have an artist meeting that we have regularly. We have a large sculpture going in at the front of the building. And so working through some details on that, and hope to show you that in the future here. But just to say there's lots of other things happening in the background as we're moving toward the finalization of this project. So thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Lisa. Very well done. Very important.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. So next, we're going to have a working lunch. So the commission will now go into executive session to consider records that are exempt from public inspection pursuant to ORS 192.660. If there's any members of the media present. So we have members of the media present. And I don't need to read this. Okay. All right, the commission is back in session after our recess. And if there's no further discussion or agenda items, we will adjourn. We're adjourned.